Welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to be finishing up the back half of this 2002 Z06 Corvette, and we are going to be finishing up where we left off before. We're going to be installing the clutch, shimming it, as well as the torque tube all the way back to the fuel pump, and then finishing up with the suspension install. Stay tuned.
Alright, first thing we're going to remove the starter, and then we're going to remove the manifolds. This is just in preparation for when we start to install the headers. The first plan of action is to get this rear main seal replaced. It sometimes can be a pain to remove, so take your time. Do not gouge the crank or you have an oil leak. You want to clean that channel out before you press in your new seal. Normally you can take the rear main cover off in order to install the seal, or if you have this J tool like I do, you can just install it in place. It just cinches down until the gasket bottoms out in the housing. Once that's done, back it out, remove your tool, inspect it, make sure it doesn't look like there's any weird creases, and then you can remove the shield for the starter, install a flywheel fixture holding tool loosely, and then get your flywheel installed. You use Loctite on these bolts, so you definitely don't want these coming loose. You want to tighten up the flywheel fixture just so it doesn't move, so you can set your torque numbers on the flywheel itself. If you don't have a flywheel holding fixture, you can actually just hold it with a pry bar. In fact, that's what you're going to have to do anyway when you go to torque down the clutch. So that's removing the pilot bearing the quickest looking way possible. It usually takes a good 30 minutes to pull that thing off. You want to clean the surface of the clutch, all the metal faces. You're going to want to torque those down. Here I'm using a pry bar showing you can rotate it when you're torquing this down. This is a Henson clutch bleeder. I'm not really a fan of this one in particular. I've used tick bleeders in the past, and there's an extra fitting on the top that helps with bleeding. This fitting on the top end I'm not really a fan of. So with this, I'm making a custom shim so I can space out the slave cylinder at the proper clutch spacing for this particular car. So here you want to take a test fit. Once the slave cylinder is installed with the remote bleeder, you're going to want to take the bell housing, and in this case I'm going to double check my measurements first, and then I'm going to test fit it to make sure it clears. So now I can install the bell housing back on the back side of the engine. These bolts are very difficult to get in. I use a magnet and basically push the bolts in and then tighten them with an extension and a swivel. Then you want to carefully line your torque tube up so you can install it. It should slide in with the splines of the clutch. Make sure you remove the holding fixture. You're going to want to try to hold all your lines in the upward position, especially the shifter, because it will get hung up on the floor. And then you're going to want to line that up. Look at the gap in the bell housing to the torque tube. Make sure the gap looks somewhat even from top to bottom, left to right. And then just keep going until you get the splines to fully seat in. Once you get it in close to the pins, you can go ahead and lock it down with the bolts. I use this metal rod with a long bolt end welded to it to push and pull wire harnesses up and down. It allows me to tuck wires like you just saw. I just put the slave bleeder up way away from the exhaust. Here comes the belly pan with a million bolts. This one's always fun. I can do it with my eyes closed. And it takes forever, even at like 1400 times normal speed. So now we can support the back half, remove the trans jack and fixture, and just hold it with a pull jack. Now I'm going to modify the fuel pump. I am going to have to use a custom method that is going to eliminate the bucket's use, really. The bucket at this point is just going to be a holding fixture, but it's the only way I can get a 320 liter per hour pump in there. I would have used a Walbro 450, but those will overpower the stock filter regulator. So since we're only going to be running maybe 8 pounds of boost, I'm not really worried about running a boost reference regulator just yet. We've got enough injector to hold a ton of power, and I think it's going to be just enough. This should be somewhere around 500 horsepower. So we go ahead, throw the pump back in. It's kind of playing Tetris. You want to make sure you snug up your bolts. There's gaskets on the bolts as well as the face of the fuel pump. Here is a hot wire kit for the fueling. It basically runs a wire all the way from the alternator back to the fuel pump, and it's activated by a relay that is turned on by the factory system. So now that we got the rear suspension installed, we can pretty much finish this thing up. I'm going to install the factory titanium Z06 cap back.
Got the hot wire kit installed, ran behind the frame rail into that little hole right there. To keep any heat from getting to it, use the same ground strap as the fuel filter. Ended up extending this hot wire kit ground configuration where it used to end right there where the heat shrink is. Ended up bringing it further down underneath the filter into this chassis ground. Clean that chassis ground up because, of course, like all grounds on the C5, they're all painted. And yeah, that should take care of that. Ran the power wire away from the fuel rail, but ended up running it down the length of this brake line inside the torque tube. Well, that'll pretty much sum it up for the back side of this car. We still got to install the shifter and the wheels, but we're pretty much ready to get to the fun side.
We're going to be matching our Cook's long tube headers up in the next video. So you definitely want to stay tuned and subscribe if you're new. And if you like the video, definitely leave a like, and I will catch you guys on the next one. All right, see ya.